Good evening, afternoon actually. My name is Christian, I'm a communications manager, and I love local newspapers. I didn't used to though, because I'm born and raised in Oslo, which is the only real town in Norway. Sorry, Fredrikstad, but it is the truth. And since all the biggest newspapers and the radio and the TV, they were all based in Oslo, staffed by reporters and journalists and photographers and editors, all living in Oslo, the national media were our local media. And Oslo politics were national politics. At least it felt like that for us living in the capital. And to be honest, local newspapers have over the years gotten a bit of a bad rap as places where non-stories get the front page, like potatoes and carrots shaped like people. Or one of my favorites, whenever some big celebrities in Scandinavia, local journalists go to flight tracking sites like Flight Radar 24 and track Bruce Springsteen's private jet flying over Odda, and they say, Bruce might have seen the lights from the harbor. Whatever. Or take the Netflix series Afterlife, where Ricky Gervais plays a disillusioned local newspaper journalist with a death wish. And all the goings-on at the Tambury Gazette, and the story that Gervais and his sidekick photographer, the kind of stories they find and produce and publish on the front page is they give us the idea of this dusty local newspaper. And here in Norway, the former journalist Ken André Ottesen now has more than 400,000 followers on his Instagram profile, Beadesken, and he travels the country with a stand-up show based solely on weird and funny Norwegian local newspaper headlines. I've seen his show. It is 2 hours long, and it is hilarious. So if ever he comes here, go see him. Just love it. But both Gervais and Ken André, they do their ridicule of the local newspaper with heart. A lot of love and a profound understanding of the local newspaper's role in smaller communities. And as I said, I haven't always loved local newspapers. But two things made me change my mind. First of all, I moved out of Oslo. I moved to one of the suburbs, and now I subscribe to my local newspaper, Budstikka, to see photos of my kids doing sports, or read why the power is out in my neighborhood, or what new stores are going to open up in my local mall. And secondly, I have discovered the local newspaper as an instrumental tool in my work. The delivery service Wolt, where I work, is a global company, but our operations are extremely local. So getting our story in the local newspaper is essential because people love their local newspapers and they actually do read them. And we PR folks, we know that getting our story into the local paper is much easier than getting it into top-tier national media. Simply because the editorial staff is smaller and there is less to write about. But even the local newspaper now has a 24-hour news cycle. There's no deadline anymore, or there's always a deadline. And the digital newspaper needs a constant flow of content updates. So when you come with a ready-made story, the editor will usually welcome it and publish it. But you gotta make it super local. The time where you could write the same story 60 times and just change the name of the city is gone, thanks to omnipresent digital channels. So every time I write an original piece, and I sprinkle it shamelessly with local dialect words and geographic references. And sometimes I will even up our local alibi by changing the spokesperson. Rather than using our general manager or me, I will pick somebody that actually is from that little town. And that will be my spokesperson. So Andreas, who works in operations, he will be my poster boy for any story in Kristiansund. And Anne-Marie from marketing, she's my girl for any story related to Ålesund. Because everyone loves to see their people in the paper, right? And I think Andreas' mother actually is collecting all those clippings every time he's in the local newspaper. So the local newspaper is simply an important part of what makes local communities well-functioning and informed. And I have learned now, after living 20 years outside of Oslo, that Oslo politics isn't necessarily national politics. And even in the local elections, though, much of the national media coverage is on the national issues and the national politicians. And with local parties in Norway having quite a lot of autonomy, you can have different coalition partners in different municipalities that are different from the ones that you have in parliament. And the local party's position on cases, issues, could be different from community to community. And despite the growth of political content in social media, traditional media is still seen by the majority of Norwegians as their main source of information come election time. And the only ones who will question our local politicians on our behalf about the things that matter, what schools might be closed or parking fees or the local spending in our community, is the local journalist and local editor. And having local newspapers with a strong local foundation and a local agenda is an important part of our local democracy. In the US, the problem of news deserts is growing. And a news desert is a community that is no longer served by daily or non-daily newspapers. The term emerged in the United States after hundreds of daily and weekly newspapers were closed in the early 2000s and 2010s. And in 2024, the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University in Chicago released a report that found that 1,561 counties in the United States had only one local news organization, while 206 counties had none. That means that 55 million Americans live in news desert counties. And the study concluded that news desert counties had lower median household income, lower rates of educational attainment, higher median population age, and higher poverty rates. On the other hand, in Norway, we have more newspapers per capita than any place else in the world. The Norwegian democracy is among the most robust on the planet, and year after year, Norwegians top the list of the happiest people on earth. As an economist, I am very, very careful not to claim causality, but there are definitely some strong correlations here. My father was a newspaperman, and he used to say back in the 1990s that anybody can start a newspaper. All you need is a couple of 100 million kroner, an office building, a printing press, a distribution network, hundreds of journalists, photographers, ad salespeople, financial controllers, and I guess a PR person or two, right? But today you can, and I'm pretty sure many actually do, produce, publish, and distribute a newspaper solely from your iPhone. So it's a bit easier now, Dad. And in fact, in the last 5 years, the number of newspapers in Norway has grown by 10%. And since we don't have any national newspapers, they're all local newspapers or trade papers. And this is where the growth in media now happens. And most of them actually make money. Because while the big media outlets have taught us since the early days of the internet, those of us can remember that online news is free, the local papers have moved most of their content now behind the paywall, forcing us to actually pay for the journalism if you want to read about what's going on in our local community. Smart. And in a media landscape that is getting more and more fragmented and dominated by social media platforms that time and time again have shown that they're not really reliable news sources, the local newspaper might be that last common campfire, that one source of news that everyone can relate to. And the big media groups now see their revenues diluted, and they've been forced to cut back on their editorial staff. And they now use AI to the kind of tasks that previously were given to the most junior staffers. The local newspapers have always been a very good breeding ground for journalists. and editors and photographers. And many journalists fresh out of school have been hired by their hometown papers as summer interns, or they return to their hometowns after a few years in the big city as editors of their local paper. And without the local newspaper, I am afraid that we will not have the same access to professional, experienced journalists and editors in the future. So, my ask for you today. As citizens of your hometown, buy a subscription to your local paper. A month's digital access doesn't cost more than a pizza delivered to your house by Wolt. So either buy the one where you live now, to have a seat by that campfire, or get the paper from where you grew up, where you might have parents and friends still living. Because journalism costs money. And the best way for them to be funded is if we all pay for journalism through subscriptions. And somehow the local papers have cracked the code somehow, and they are now getting more revenue from subscriptions than from ads. And marketers, don't dismiss the local paper, be it on print or digital, when you're buying ads. I mean, I know it's tempting to buy the guaranteed eyeballs from Meta or Google, but I will claim that you will get more attention with an old-fashioned full-page spread in the local newspaper. And it is often surprisingly affordable. A bit more than one pizza, but still. And you're going to do a good deed by supporting the local newspapers with revenue. And PR people, take it from me. Never underestimate the power of the tailored local story. It is a lot more work to do 60 individual stories than just one, but the hit rate is so much higher. And the locals actually read it. Like I said, there's not a lot of stuff going on there. And this might not be fully scientific, but it's been my experience that whenever we have launched Wolt in a new city, the cities where we got good local newspaper coverage are the ones that we did quite good. And where the local papers didn't write about us, not so good. So no wonder I love the local paper, right? And while it is true that the local newspapers still run pictures of funny-looking produce on the front page, and the coverage of international crisis is based more on whether or not somebody from that little town was affected, there is no better source for crucial information about our local communities. There's no better breeding ground for the future journalists, and there's no better place for me to get my local stories published. So, to the dedicated journalists, the editors, photographers, and staff who work tirelessly 24/7 to bring us the local news, we salute you. Your work is essential. Your dedication is inspiring, and your impact is immeasurable. So, let us all continue to cherish, support, read, and invest in our local newspapers. The stories of our local communities are being told, our voices are heard, and the truth remains a cornerstone of our democracy. Thank you.